In breaking news, the Vatican has confirmed Pope Francis has died. Just hours after an appearance during the holiest weekend of the Christian calendar, the Catholic world is in mourning. He had been in critical condition due to double pneumonia and a lung infection. For the latest on this breaking news, head to 7news.com.au.
When a world leader passes, statements pour in. But when Pope Francis passed away, something different happened. The world didn't just mourn a religious figure, it mourned a man who touched hearts far beyond faith. Celebrities, politicians, athletes, and everyday people flooded social media with stories, gratitude, and tears. From Hollywood stars to tech giants, from royal families to presidents, everyone had something to say about the people's Pope. Why? Because Pope Francis wasn't just the head of the Catholic Church. He was a symbol of compassion, humility, and hope in a world that often feels divided. Whether it was his embrace of the poor, his fight for justice, or simply his warm smile that could light up a room, Francis left a mark on believers and non-believers alike. Today, we're looking at how the world's biggest names reacted to his passing, and why his legacy will live far beyond the Vatican walls. These aren't just tributes. They're proof that Pope Francis changed lives, one act of kindness at a time.
If he's strong enough, you hear the cheers, it's a good sign. Someone is about to appear at that balcony. He has, of course, been very poorly. He spent 5 weeks in hospital, but here he is.
Eva Longoria's tribute, honoring a heart full of compassion. When news of Pope Francis's passing broke, actress and activist Eva Longoria was one of the first to share her heartfelt tribute. Known for her advocacy for marginalized communities, Eva felt a deep connection to the Pope's mission. On social media, she wrote, "Thank you, Pope Francis, for showing the world that true leadership is compassion in action." Eva highlighted how Francis never forgot those society often ignores: the poor, refugees, and the voiceless. She spoke about his efforts to bring humanity back into global conversations, whether it was standing up for immigrants or reminding leaders that dignity belongs to everyone, not just the privileged. In interviews, Longoria often praised Pope Francis for modernizing the image of the Church. She admired how he stepped beyond religious boundaries and focused on universal values like kindness, humility, and justice. He wasn't just a pope for Catholics, she said. He was a beacon of hope for anyone who believed in goodness. Her tribute ended with a simple but powerful message. "The world feels heavier without you, but your light will guide us forever." Eva's words echoed how many felt, that Pope Francis wasn't just a religious figure, but a symbol of compassion in a divided world. While Eva Longoria reflected on his compassion, across the ocean, a royal voice shared his own memories. For King Charles, Pope Francis wasn't just a global leader. He was a personal ally in faith, peace, and tradition.
The victims of discrimination, violence, abuse, exploitation, and human trafficking. The Filipino migrant workers and their families. The survivors of natural calamities and armed conflicts. The non-Christian Catholics. The followers of non-Christian religions. The promoters of peace, especially in our beloved Mindanao, and the whole of creation that groans. All of us want to say again and again, maraming salamat po, Santo Padre. You often end your meetings and encounters by saying, "Vi chiedo di pregare per me."
King Charles reflects on their final meeting. Following the Pope's passing, King Charles III released a touching statement recalling his last encounter with Pope Francis. The two had met several times over the years, sharing a mutual respect for interfaith dialogue, environmental protection, and humanitarian causes. But it was their final meeting, just weeks before Easter, that left a lasting impression on the king. In his tribute, Charles expressed both sorrow and gratitude. "I am deeply saddened by the loss of His Holiness, but profoundly thankful for the moments we shared, especially his final Easter blessing, which I will cherish forever." King Charles praised Pope Francis for being a pillar of moral clarity in a world often clouded by conflict and division. He admired Francis's ability to unite people of all backgrounds, calling him a rare leader who led with both wisdom and warmth. Their shared passion for environmental issues, especially after Francis's release of Laudato Si', created a bond between them. Charles noted, "We found common ground in our belief that caring for creation is a sacred duty." As he concluded his tribute, King Charles reflected on the Pope's legacy. He was a shepherd, not just to his flock, but to all humanity. His voice called us to be better stewards of each other and this planet. While royalty remembered his wisdom, in Spain, a beloved actor focused on something even simpler: the Pope's endless mercy. Antonio Banderas offered a heartfelt tribute, celebrating the kindness that defined Francis's life. Antonio Banderas honors Pope's mercy. Spanish actor Antonio Banderas didn't speak of politics or global influence when he paid tribute to Pope Francis. Instead, he spoke from the heart, remembering a man who, above all else, radiated kindness. In a moving post, Banderas wrote, "Pope Francis taught us that mercy is not weakness, it is the greatest strength." Banderas reflected on how Francis always prioritized the needy and forgotten. Whether visiting prisons, embracing refugees, or comforting the sick, the Pope's actions spoke louder than any sermon. Antonio admired how Francis made every person feel seen, regardless of their status or beliefs. He also shared a personal story about attending a Vatican event years ago. Watching Pope Francis interact with people, Banderas noticed something rare. He listened, truly listened. Even with a crowd waiting, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Antonio ended his tribute by calling Francis a pope of the people and a friend to those without friends. His message wasn't filled with grand statements, but with sincere gratitude for a man who lived his faith through simple daily acts of love. As Antonio Banderas honored the Pope's mercy across the Atlantic, a former president reflected on something just as powerful: moral leadership. Barack Obama saw Pope Francis not just as a spiritual figure, but as a leader who inspired the world to be better through humility.
Church and its reputation, namely in addressing the climate crisis, his endeavour to promote unity, and his historic apology to survivors of sexual abuse. His final days were spent in Rome's Gemelli Hospital, battling a prolonged asthmatic respiratory crisis while being treated for pneumonia and a complex lung infection. He'd received blood transfusions after tests showed low counts of platelets, which are needed for clotting. Nine's Brett McLeod begins our coverage of this breaking news.
265 popes had come before him, but his was a papacy of firsts. The first pope from the Americas, the first pope from the Southern Hemisphere, the first Jesuit in the role. Born in Buenos Aires in 1936, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was the son of Italian migrants who escaped fascist Italy. His father worked on the railways. He was a born fighter. When he was 21, an infection meant part of his lung had to be removed. Jorge graduated as a chemical technician. His first jobs were as a janitor and a bar bouncer, before choosing the path to the priesthood. He was ordained in 1969.
Demos un signo a esta ciudad de Buenos Aires.
He became Archbishop of Buenos Aires.
Familias que están desunidas, corazones que están peleados.
And in 2001, he was made a cardinal by Pope John Paul II. He held several key administrative positions before, in 2013, at the age of 76, his fellow cardinals elected him leader of the world's 1.3
Barack Obama on moral leadership. When Barack Obama spoke about Pope Francis after his passing, his words carried the weight of deep respect. The former U.S. president had often praised Francis during his time in office, calling him a voice of conscience for the world. In his tribute, Obama wrote, "Pope Francis reminded us that true leadership comes not from power, but from humility and moral courage." Obama admired how Francis never shied away from difficult conversations, whether it was addressing poverty, climate change, or human rights. During the Pope's historic visit to the White House in 2015, Obama called him a transformative figure, someone who inspired millions to think beyond politics, beyond religion, and focus on shared humanity. In his statement, Obama reflected on how Francis challenged leaders to care for the least among us. He spoke for those without a voice, and in doing so, challenged all of us to look inward and ask, are we doing enough for others? Obama ended his tribute with a powerful reminder. Pope Francis didn't just preach values, he lived them. The world has lost a moral giant, but his example will continue to guide us. While Obama highlighted Francis's role on the world stage, another voice from Hollywood brought attention to something more personal: his ability to love without limits. Whoopi Goldberg reminded everyone that Pope Francis's greatest gift was his unconditional embrace of all people, regardless of faith or background. Whoopi Goldberg celebrates his love for all. For Whoopi Goldberg, Pope Francis wasn't defined by his title, he was defined by his heart. In her emotional tribute on The View, Whoopi said, "He wasn't just the Pope, he was everybody's Pope." She praised how Francis welcomed believers, non-believers, and everyone in between with open arms. Whoopi often spoke about her admiration for Francis's inclusive approach. She highlighted how he reached out to communities that had long felt judged or excluded by the church, from LGBTQ individuals to people of other faiths. His famous words, "Who am I to judge?" resonated deeply with her and millions around the world. In her tribute, Whoopi recalled how Francis didn't care about labels. He cared about people, their struggles, their hopes, their dignity. He made you feel like you mattered, no matter who you were or what you believed, she said. She also pointed out that Francis had a rare warmth, a genuine kindness that transcended religion. He showed us that love isn't confined to one faith, it's universal. For Whoopi, Pope Francis embodied the idea that compassion knows no boundaries. As Whoopi remembered his love for all, another voice shared a deeply personal moment. Politician J.D. Vance revealed that he had spoken to Pope Francis just a day before his passing, a conversation that left a lasting impact and made his tribute even more heartfelt. J.D. Vance recalls last conversation. U.S. Senator J.D. Vance delivered one of the most emotional tributes following Pope Francis's death. In a heartfelt message, Vance shared that he had the honor of meeting Francis just one day before he passed away. That final conversation, he said, was something he would carry with him forever. Vance described Pope Francis as frail in body but strong in spirit. Despite his declining health, Francis took the time to speak about hope, forgiveness, and the importance of serving others. Even in his final hours, he was more concerned about the world's pain than his own, Vance recalled. He shared how Francis encouraged him to always listen to those without power, a reminder that leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege. He told me, "Never forget the poor. They will teach you more than any book ever could." Those were some of the last words Francis spoke to him. Vance's tribute wasn't about politics or global influence. It was about the quiet wisdom of a man who, even facing death, remained focused on kindness. "The world didn't just lose a pope," Vance wrote. "We lost a living example of humility and grace." While J.D. Vance shared a final intimate conversation, others remembered lighter moments. Late-night host Jimmy Fallon took to social media to celebrate a side of Pope Francis many didn't get to see, his sense of humor and joyful spirit. Jimmy Fallon remembers the Pope's humor. While many tributes focused on Pope Francis's compassion and leadership, Jimmy Fallon reminded the world of something equally important: his sense of humor. On The Tonight Show, Fallon shared a story that made audiences smile through their sadness. "Not everyone knows this," Jimmy said, "but Pope Francis had a laugh that could light up a room." Fallon recalled meeting the Pope during a special Vatican event. Nervously trying to break the ice, Jimmy cracked a light joke, and to his surprise, Francis laughed. "It wasn't a polite chuckle, it was a genuine belly laugh," Fallon remembered fondly. That moment stuck with him, showing that even as the leader of over 1 billion people, Francis never lost touch with simple human joy. In his tribute, Fallon said, "Pope Francis taught us that even with the weight of the world on your shoulders, you can still smile. You can still share a laugh." He admired how Francis used humor not as a distraction, but as a way to connect, to remind people that faith didn't have to be distant or serious all the time. Jimmy ended his message by saying, "The world feels heavier today, but I'll always remember the Pope who wasn't afraid to laugh with us." It was a beautiful reminder that greatness isn't just found in speeches or actions. Sometimes, it's found in a simple moment of shared laughter. While Jimmy Fallon celebrated Francis's warmth and humor, another public figure, known for a very different tone, offered his own respectful words. Donald Trump reflected on Pope Francis not as a comedian or reformer, but as a strong, unwavering global figure. Donald Trump's reaction: respect for a strong global figure. When former President Donald Trump reacted to the death of Pope Francis, his message was direct and firm, much like Trump himself. In a statement released shortly after the news, Trump wrote, "Pope Francis was a strong man of faith who stood by his beliefs in a changing world." While the two leaders had their differences during their time in office, Trump's tribute focused on respect for Francis's unwavering commitment to his values. He acknowledged that, whether people agreed with him or not, Francis never wavered in his mission. He didn't bend to pressure. He stayed true to his faith, and for that, he earned the world's respect, Trump said. Trump also highlighted Francis's role on the global stage, calling him a figure of stability in uncertain times. He recognized that Francis wasn't just a religious leader, but a symbol of continuity and tradition for billions around the world. Ending his tribute, Trump stated, "The passing of Pope Francis marks the loss of a leader who stood firm when it mattered most. Melania and I extend our prayers to Catholics everywhere." It was a rare moment of unity, where politics faded and respect for a global icon took center stage. While Trump reflected on Francis's strength, a voice from the tech world offered a different perspective. Elon Musk, known for his focus on the future, paused to honor a man who led by focusing on humanity, simplicity, and timeless values. Elon Musk's reflection, praising simplicity in a complex world. When Elon Musk shared his thoughts on Pope Francis's passing, it wasn't about religion or tradition. It was about leadership in its purest form. On Twitter, Musk wrote, "In a world obsessed with complexity and power, Pope Francis led with simplicity and a heart." Musk, a man known for rockets, AI, and ambitious visions of the future, expressed admiration for how Francis kept his focus grounded. He highlighted how the Pope's commitment to humility stood out in an era driven by ego and excess. "True innovation isn't just about technology," Musk tweeted. "It's about changing how we treat each other." Francis did that. Elon also recalled their rare but notable exchange on ethics and technology. The Pope had once reminded innovators like Musk that progress should never forget people. He told us the future must serve humanity, not the other way around, Musk reflected. In his tribute, Musk praised Francis as a human-centered leader, someone who didn't get lost in the noise of modern life, but stayed focused on compassion, fairness, and dignity. He ended his message with a simple line: "The world needs more leaders like him." As Elon Musk's words echoed across social media, he was far from alone. Around the globe, celebrities from every corner of entertainment, sports, and politics took to their platforms, flooding timelines with memories and gratitude for a man whose impact reached far beyond the church. Global celebrity tributes flood social media. The moment news of Pope Francis's passing hit headlines, social media lit up with tributes from every corner of the world. Actors, musicians, athletes, and public figures shared their memories, gratitude, and respect for a man whose influence reached far beyond religion. Legends like Lionel Messi, fellow Argentine, called him the pride of Argentina and a global symbol of humility. Singers like Bono from U2 praised Francis for being a rock star of compassion. Even figures like LeBron James posted, honoring the Pope's advocacy for social justice, saying, "He stood up for the people like a true king." From Hollywood to the football pitch, from music stages to political arenas, the message was clear. Pope Francis wasn't just a leader for Catholics. He was a beacon for humanity. Hashtags like #Thank Francis and #People's Pope trended worldwide as millions shared how his words and actions touched their lives. It wasn't just the famous, ordinary people joined in, posting stories of how Francis inspired them to be kinder, more accepting, and more mindful of those in need. The digital wave of love showed exactly how far his message had traveled. As tributes poured in, many reflected on where it all began, in the humble streets of Buenos Aires. To understand Pope Francis's greatness, you had to look at his roots, where a boy named Jorge learned that true strength comes from serving others. Humble beginnings in Buenos Aires. Before the world knew him as Pope Francis, he was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, a quiet boy growing up in the working-class neighborhoods of Buenos Aires. Born to Italian immigrant parents, Jorge's life was shaped not by wealth or privilege, but by faith, family, and a deep sense of community. He saw poverty up close, not from a distance, but in daily life. His father worked as a railway accountant, and Jorge learned early that dignity isn't tied to money, but to how you treat others. He often helped around the house, played football in the streets, and dreamed simple dreams rooted in kindness. It was in those streets, among ordinary people, that Jorge developed his lifelong commitment to the poor and marginalized. Years later, he would say, "My people are poor, and I am one of them." That wasn't just a statement. It was a promise he kept until his final days. These humble beginnings never left him, even when he rose through church ranks. Whether he was archbishop or pope, Jorge from Buenos Aires remained a man who believed that greatness starts with humility. And when he became pope, those values didn't change. In fact, they defined his entire papacy. As the first Jesuit pope, Francis didn't just wear the white robe. He redefined what it meant to lead, choosing simplicity over grandeur every step of the way. The first Jesuit pope redefines tradition. When Jorge Bergoglio became Pope Francis in 2013, he didn't just make history as the first Jesuit pope, he transformed expectations. The Jesuits are known for their vows of poverty, education, and service, and Francis embodied those principles from the very start. He refused the lavish trappings of papal life. No golden throne, no grand palace. Instead, he chose a modest guest house, wore simple garments, and often carried his own bags. He famously said, "The world tells us to seek success, power, and money. God tells us to seek humility, service, and love." Francis's papacy was marked by breaking unnecessary traditions while holding on to core values. He washed the feet of prisoners, dined with the homeless, and insisted that church leaders stay close to their communities. For him, leadership wasn't about being served, it was about serving others. By redefining how a pope could live and lead, Francis reminded the world that faith should never be about status. It should be about action, compassion, and walking alongside those who suffer. His simplicity wasn't a gesture, it was a revolution. But Francis didn't stop at changing the Vatican's image. He became a global champion for justice, fighting for refugees, the environment, and human dignity. His voice echoed far beyond church walls, calling for a better world for everyone. The People's Pope. As the world mourns, one title keeps appearing across every tribute: the People's Pope. And it's easy to see why. Pope Francis spent his life fighting for those without a voice. He stood up for refugees, demanded action on climate change, called out economic injustice, and reached out to marginalized communities the Church had long overlooked. He was a pope of many firsts, the first Latin American leader of the Church, the first Jesuit, and the first to truly embrace modern challenges head-on. But beyond the records, it was his human touch that people will remember most. Pope Francis didn't lead from a distance. He walked among the people, listened to their stories, and carried their burdens. His legacy isn't written in gold, it's written in the countless lives he touched with kindness, humility, and hope. As one tribute perfectly put it, he didn't just preach about love, he lived it. And that's why, long after the bells of St. Peter's fall silent and the white smoke rises for his successor, the world will continue to feel his impact. Pope Francis may be gone, but his message, one of compassion, unity, and service, will guide generations to come. He reminded us all that true greatness isn't found in power, but in how we care for one another. As the tributes continue to pour in, one thing is clear: Pope Francis wasn't just a pope for Catholics. He was a global figure who redefined what it means to lead with heart. From Eva Longoria's words of gratitude to Barack Obama's praise of moral leadership, from Elon Musk reflecting on simplicity to Jimmy Fallon remembering his laughter, every story, every message pointed to the same truth. Francis led differently. He didn't rely on power or tradition. He relied on compassion, humility, and a deep belief that even the smallest gesture could change a life. He was a pope who dined with the homeless, washed the feet of prisoners, embraced refugees, and reminded world leaders that success means nothing if we forget the people we're meant to serve. His famous words, "Who am I to judge?" weren't just about tolerance. They were about love without conditions. Pope Francis didn't chase headlines, yet he made them by simply being true to his values. That's why celebrities, politicians, and ordinary people alike felt compelled to honor him. Because in a world often driven by ego and division, Francis stood as a rare example of unity and kindness. As we say goodbye to the People's Pope, his legacy doesn't end here. His voice, calling for mercy, justice, and care for one another will echo through history. So, what can we take from the life and leadership of Pope Francis? Maybe it's this: you don't need a throne to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is a listening ear, a helping hand, and the courage to lead with love. Thank you for joining us in remembering a truly remarkable man. If this tribute moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. How did Pope Francis inspire you? Until next time, let's carry forward his message of hope, compassion, and unity.